go right ahead. And I am Natasha Scott. I'm the Director of Educator Engagement at iCivics. And I'm so excited to have you here today with us. As we dive in, the first thing that I just want to do as we wait for, give everyone a moment or two. We always know trying to jump on, sometimes rushing home. There's going to be a link in the chat that my partner in crime and colleague, Patricia, dropped in for us today. So those of you who were with us last week, you guys know the deal. But this is where we're going to engage today. One of the great things about these sessions is this is not going to be us talking at you for the entire hour and a half, but actually giving you space to think, process, understand, and ask questions. And you will always have the chat space, but that landing page also gives you other space for, to just process some of the questions as we're going through each of the different sections. You'll also have access to the slide deck for today. I know sometimes you want to go back, look at a slide again, and there's nothing worse than like, I wish I had seen that slide. So that's part of the reason that the slide deck is there too. So I'm going to actually jump right in because we have a packed agenda for today. And while everyone is continuing to join us in our conversation today, I'm just going to go over some logistics and go ahead and screen share for you. I always like to start with a face because sometimes it's nice to know that there's an actual person there and it's not just like someone hitting play on the recording. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. And the first spot I'm going to take you to is our landing page for today. I always give the caveat that I am a former elementary teacher by trade. So I always ask for thumbs up if you see something. So it's not an insult. I just can't help it. You should see our landing page for today. So I'm going to go ahead and walk you through that. So right at the top, you will see our slide deck for today. And farther down, one of the things that we really love to do, especially as we think about this Educating for American Democracy project and the collaboration that is happening across the country, we want to know where you are. We want to add yourself to the map. So throughout today's session, we are going to be using different Padlets, and it's so easy. All you're going to do is click on the plus sign in the corner, and you can add your location, add your name. And if you were here last time, I challenge you to see if you can change your color to a different color. But take a moment, go ahead and drop that in. The link should be into the chat. Again, if you're having any trouble with that, please feel free to let us know. We'll be sure to make sure that you have access. Everyone should be able to get that easily. And I love as we see everyone popping up on the map and seeing where everyone's located across the country. And as you can tell, the people who are the markers, let me use proper vocabulary, the markers that are on there were actually participants who joined us last time. So if you're here again, welcome. We're actually going to take a quick poll in just a moment, just to get a sense of who was here last time and who's brand new to our conversation today, which is super exciting. And after you've plotted yourself on our map, go head down to our next Padlet and introduce yourself, okay? And part of the reason I do love having the Padlets there is then you can go back and see who's in the room, see who's here on those Padlets, which is great. Let us know who you are. I love when people throw in the pictures. Thank you, Emma. Have some fun. One of the great things with Padlet is you can add in pictures throughout our conversation today. Anything that's helping spark connections for you. And we are going to go ahead and clear those annotations because we don't need them there today. Perfect. Okay. And so when you open up for today, what you're going to do is you are actually going to go right on and go right into the website link and do that there. You do not need the annotation today. And actually, Patricia, I'm going to ask you if you know how to turn that off on the back end. That would be amazing. And this is the joy. We are real people on this end. We also try to make sure that we keep that front and centered. Okay. So we see people popping on, we see people sharing themselves in the chat. Okay, super exciting to see everyone there. There we go. Our introductions. See some bears waving. I love when we get creative. That's one of the things about today's session is we really want to make sure that you have a really good experience, that you're having the opportunity to engage with your colleagues. It is not just, we're not just here for a usual lecture. We are here to have some community, have some conversation, and learn even more. And for those of you who are just popping in, we'll keep throwing that link to the Google site into the chat. Just request it and we will keep going from there. Okay, so next thing I'm now going to, so welcome everyone. You can see where people are chiming in across the country. Future sessions, if you know anyone in Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, it's so quiet over there. We need to find some teachers to join us and participate in the conversation over there. So for I'm going to go back and jump to our slide deck for today and let us clear this out. There we go. So for our presentation for today, jumping right in, as I mentioned before, we're going to be doing all of our engagement on that Google site. So if you ever lose access, just request it in the chat and we'll throw it right in. Also, you'll see there introductions, the map showing us where everyone is. Feel free anytime during the session, go back, look who's in the room. And the other great thing about our engagement today is that if we're continuing in the presentation and you notice, oh, I'm still capturing my thought there, take a moment, finish your thought, and it'll stay there. You don't have to worry about rushing along because you'll be able to capture your thoughts there and take that time. And you'll see sometimes as we get to these Padlets, it'll be a little bit of wait time as people kind of think and process, and that's perfectly fine. That's what we want to make sure that we're doing in these sessions, not just pouring information into your brain and expecting you to just walk away full, but actually have a full experience here, having conversations, engaging. If you have any questions, keep throwing them into the chat. Shout out to the iCivics team that is here today. We have Emma, we have Michael, we have Patricia. There are so many of our team members who are here ready to answer any questions in the chat if anything comes up, or to flag it down for me if it's something that's a great conversation to have as a whole group. Right. So a couple of reminders, logistical reminders as we dive in for today. If you are looking for, we always get the question afterwards, if we're looking for a certificate, if we need any of that, we will be sending out participation notices afterwards. Really how we track that is keeping track of the Padlets and the exit ticket, and at the end, you'll see that the exit ticket also requires you to fill in your name, first name and last name. So don't forget that information. You'll see that there. Additionally, we want to make sure that if you hear any tidbits that you just want to share, if you really love sharing on to your educator network and social media, hashtag EAD roadmap, go ahead and share. Make sure we want to continue to share what we're learning so that other people can participate in the conversation too. And with all of the logistics out of the way, with everyone on the Google site, we can finally jump into our learning for today. So as we join today, we know some of you were here last time. So I'd love to get a sense. Let's see if I can pull up my screen. I'd love to get a sense of who was in the room last time. So I'm going to launch a poll. Let us know. Did you attend session number 1 live? Did you watch the recording of session number 1? Or is today your first EAD session and you're super excited? I know I didn't put super excited in. I'll just take that as the assumption that you're super excited to join us today. Okay, we're still waiting for some people to reply. We'll give everyone a moment. And as we're going through today, our focus is really focusing in on Design Challenge 1 and theme number 1, but my colleagues will be popping in links into the chat. So if you missed it and you're wondering, oh, what are the other themes about? You can always click there and continue exploring. Okay, so we have about half of you who attended or watched the previous session, and about half of you whose your first session is today. So we'll go into a little more detail, but we're going to keep up a kind of a quick pace today. So just keep that in mind. If you have questions, just throw in the chat. Our team members will definitely answer them for you. Okay, so as we set the stage, just as a reminder, since some of us are new for the Educating to American Democracy conversation, we're just going to do a quick review. And as you see, this was funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities and the Department of Education. And this initiative was led by Circle, iCivics, the Edmund J. Safra Center for Ethics, the School of Civic and Economic Thought and Leadership at Arizona State University, the Jonathan Tisch School of Civic Life at Tufts University, and the over 300 contributors that came together to build and construct this work and construct this roadmap. And that was really the driving force behind it, having all of these perspectives, all of these different opinions, and having educators that were on the ground to come and join and participate in this conversation. When we think about the EAD roadmap is an inquiry-based content framework that really provides guidance for excellence in civics and history education for all learners. Yet, since the roadmap is a framework, it's not a curriculum, it's not a mandate, it provides states and districts the flexibility to use the roadmap to deliver excellent history and civics learning that leans into those essential discussions around topics like reflective patriotism, and really encourages a telling of America's plural yet shared story through a more complete and honest accounting of the past, both the good and the bad. In just a moment, we'll dive into the 7 themes that are organized in 4 grade bands, K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 12. When we talk about EAD, there's 3 core documents that you'll hear us constantly referencing throughout today's session and just in general. We have our EAD report, which contains the theory, rationale, and approach to the roadmap. We have our EAD roadmap, which contains the 7 themes across the 4 grade bands. And we have our Pedagogy Companion, which describes the 6 pedagogical core principles. So we'll touch a little bit on all of that today. You can download all of those documents at the EAD website, www.educatingforamericandemocracy.org. You'll be able to download all of them there, and you'll also find interactive versions as well. So now we are going to jump right in, and as we dive into exploring the roadmap structure, we are going to focus on theme 1, civic participation, which directly aligns with all of our discussion today. And remember, as we think about the roadmap, with inquiry at the core, the roadmap provides multiple layers of questions to guide conversations and instruction that gradually become more focused. We see where we start at those design challenges, and then we gradually become more focused with those content themes, those driving questions, and then finally down to those sample guiding questions, getting a little more complex, a little more in-depth at each layer. Now, as we think about the 5 design challenges, they really encourage educators to lean into the tension that normally arises in history and civics instruction, rather than shying away from those challenging concepts. And I will say, we always have our favorites of the different design challenges. I personally am in love with design challenge number 2, America's plural yet shared story. So definitely join us for our next session where we dive into that. But as we think about design challenge 1 today, really thinking about motivating agency and sustaining the republic. And as I mentioned before, Patricia is doing a wonderful job really putting in those links. So go explore the other themes, as the other design challenges as well, if you're new to our session today. But today we're going to take a really close look at that design challenge number 1. Now, when we think about design challenge number 1, it really has us focusing on these 3 questions connected to civic participation. Think about how we can help students understand the full context of their roles as civic participants without creating a sense of insignificance of their own agency. Also thinking, how can we help students become engaged citizens who sustain that civil disagreement and civic friendship? And also, how can we help students pursue action that is authentic, responsible, and informed? Okay, so we see these 3 different layers and 3 different questions really dive this focus with design challenge number 1. And this is where we see that nice direct correlation with civic participation. And of course, the puppy's going to chime in because we're human and we are at home. So as we think about that first concept in terms of design challenge number 1, we really want to make sure that we are sharing some of the vocabulary and some of the terminology that we refer to often. And as we think about the language that we see with this design challenge and theme, we see this terminology of citizen and civic participant throughout the roadmap. The term citizen and citizenship, I think, appears about a little over 30 times throughout the roadmap. And as we're making the connections, it's important to understand that we're using both the formal and informal definition of citizen. So where we think about how the definition of citizen is defined by the 14th Amendment, it's also important for us to think about the informal definition of a citizen of the United States. And as we think about a citizen being an active and responsible participant in any community or group. So one of the primary investigators with the Educating for American Democracy project, Dr. Peter Levine, he's a professor of citizenship and public affairs at Tufts University. Dr. Levine says that you are a citizen of a group regardless of your legal status. If you seriously ask, what should we do? If you care enough about a community or a group to identify a problem and be willing to deliberate with others to determine the best course of collective action to improve or solve a problem, then you're a citizen of that group, okay? So keeping that in mind, we have both that formal, but also that informal citizen, which is especially essential to think about as we think about all learners in our classrooms. Additionally, the concepts of civil disagreement and civic friendship will be incorporated throughout today's discussion, as our students truly have the opportunity to build their muscle around these concepts. When we think about civic participation, lots of times we don't necessarily jump into those concepts of civil disagreement and civic friendship, thinking about how are we balancing those tensions. And it's not always meeting in the middle, but understanding how do we have that discussion and do it in a fair way. And when we think about why we need to engage in these concepts of civil disagreement and civic friendship, really thinking about what are the skills that we need and what are the muscles that we need to build to really participate in our constitutional democracy in something as local as a town meeting. Now, we've gone through our design challenges, really focusing in on that design challenge number 1. Now let's think about our 7 themes. Now, alongside those design challenges, we have these 7 roadmap themes that really help you rethink and reprioritize what's going into your curriculum, allowing you to develop an educational plan that holistically teaches the full complexity of American history and civics in a way that more deeply engages your student population. So the roadmap itself is organized by 7 themes across those 4 grade bands, gradually diving into deeper concepts by anchoring in those in each theme, with overarching thematic questions, one set of questions from Civic, one set of from Civics, one set of questions from history. Now, those 7 content themes really take a deeper focus. Today, we're really going to focus in on theme number 1, exploring what it means to participate in our American constitutional democracy. So if you want to take a sneak peek at the other themes, definitely go check out the interactive roadmap. But as we dive in today into theme number 1, let's take a closer look. So theme number 1, and each of the themes are going to be set up just like this. So today, as we explore civic participation, we're really seeing how those history thematic questions allow us to explore how citizens' active engagement has mattered for our American society. While through our civics thematic questions, we explore the principles, values, habits, and skills that are necessary to engage in our constitutional democracy. So we see this balance of both understanding what civic participation looked like in the past and how it impacted us, as well as looking at the skills that we need to participate today. Additionally, within each of those themes, we have these key concepts, and these key concepts we can begin to see how these concepts spiral conceptually across K-12 and gradually deepen in complexity over time. So where we can see originally in what the K-5 key concept, explore the diversity that makes up the American community. And we can see where that directly correlates with our 6-12, explore the challenges and opportunities of pluralism, diversity, and unity within the US and abroad. Okay. Additionally, we can take a concept like exploring the history of inclusion and exclusion of the people and access to citizenship, and really see how that connects to analyzing the impact of enslavement, indigenous removal, immigration, and other hard histories and definitions and pathways to citizenship. So we see this direct correlation that happens where we set the foundation of knowledge in K-5 and gradually deepen it again in 6-12. Now, one of my favorite aspects, and those of you who were here last time heard me say this so many times, but one of my favorite aspects about the roadmap is actually how these grade bands and this content spirals across K-12. As a former elementary educator, it is essential to think about what are the skills that and what is the content that we're covering and setting the foundation for in K-5 in order to allow our students to have those even deeper conversations in 6-12. So we can see where you start in K2, and we just zoomed through those, but we can see where we start in K2, thinking about how have I helped my class or my family? What does it mean to be part of a group? Gradually progressing to why and how do people take action in order to solve problems that affect them and others? And why might we want to make changes at local, state, and national levels? How can we promote change in an effective way? So we see as these concepts gradually move across the grade levels, they become more complex, bringing in other aspects of the community, taking a closer look at what has happened in history. So 6-8, when and where have leaders and change makers emerged in American history? What motivated them and prepared them for civic engagement? So you see how this concept gradually increases and becomes more complex as they work through the grade levels. And so as we think about that, as we see some of these driving questions here, important to note, these are driving questions. There's another set of questions that go a little bit deeper with those sample guiding questions. I definitely could not fit those all on one slide. So you'll have to download the roadmap to get access to all of those. Now, with these guiding questions, it's important to think with these driving questions, it's important to think about how do they scaffold over time? And where do you start to see those connections to the work that you do in the classroom? And if you're not in the classroom setting, just your work in general, right? Some of these questions we can see can apply in different settings. Now that I've talked to you for way too long all at once, I want you to take a minute, go back to our Padlet, and really think about how can the EAD roadmap deepen student learning around that concept of engaged citizen. Think about those design challenges. Think about those thematic questions, those driving questions, those key concepts.
You muted yourself, Ms. Scott.
I'm just too quick with that mute button. Thank you so much. So you are going to go ahead and go down to our second Padlet. Take a moment, stop and think, where have you seen those connections and how can this roadmap begin to deepen student learning around this concept? I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes to do that now. And then we are going to continue diving in. And I'm going to take a glance at the chat, and colleagues, you can tell me if anything popped up in the chat that we need to go back and look at. Wonderful. And Patricia, thank you for sharing all of those links. Patricia is definitely the links like guru. She knows the perfect link to share at the perfect time, which is always amazing when you're doing virtual sessions. Okay, so we're seeing some different thoughts and ideas pop up here, thinking about how this is active but not passive. We're requiring them to think, process, and ask questions. Excellent. Okay, thinking about how inquiry really sparks that student learning. That connection between history and the real world, making sure that we're drawing that correlation constantly. Okay, it's not enough just to learn about history, but actually learning about history, learning about the civic skills that are needed for civic participation, and how can we make those connections to our lives today? Wonderful. Okay, the organization in the roadmap, the spiraling. Okay, taking an active role, making that connection between history and the current events. Okay, wonderful. Deliberation and doing the work. I think that's an amazing way to capture this. How can we engage our students in learning how to do the work? Wonderful. So if you're still jotting down your thoughts and ideas, go ahead and continue there. I'm going to head back to the presentation. And as I mentioned before, the other document that we have is our pedagogical core principles. Now, with our pedagogical core principles, which I might be a little biased, I love them. I think they're amazing. They really set the stage in terms of what are the learning dispositions and the environment that has to be established in order to engage in those rigorous inquiries. We know inquiry is amazing, rigorous, takes a lot of work, takes a lot of learning, takes a lot of releasing responsibility and empowering students to really be centered in the learning, but you have to establish the classroom environment in order to get there. And on that note, just so that you see, for those of you who are new, our Pedagogy Companion, what it's doing is it's actually telling you the what, the why, the how of the Pedagogy Companion, of each of those core principles, really thinking about what do we mean by this principle? Why does this principle matter? What is the rationale, evidence? Why is this important? What is the evidence and research supporting this principle? And how can I actually put this into practice? So that's the information you'll find in the Pedagogy Companion. And you'll also find teacher moves and student moves and district leaders and community moves as well. Those moves being the actions that an educator can take, actions, protocols, activities that both teachers and students and leadership can take to support learning when engaging with any of those principles. And so I definitely recommend download the Pedagogy Companion and go deeper. And now I'm actually going to welcome our first guest for the evening. As I said, it's not just me talking at you. I'm going to welcome our first guest, Dr. Donna Phillips. So Dr. Donna Phillips is the Director of Academic Innovations for DC Public Schools. She leads the work in DCPS, informative assessments, technology integration, cross-curricular programming, global education, advanced placement, computer science, and other curriculum instruction and assessment programs. Previously, she was the social studies coordinator or curriculum manager, where she spearheaded the development of C3 inquiry and social justice aligned K-12 social studies curriculum for 3 years. She has been a We the People teacher since 2000. Her research on the impact of We the People on student civic and constitutional knowledge, skills, and dispositions is published in the Journal of Pedagogy, as well as at the Schoolhouse Gate. So on that note, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and it's always lovely to see everyone back again. Stop sharing my screen, and Donna, you go right ahead, and I'm going to give her a moment to pull up her screen and just really engage us in a conversation as we think about how the Center for Civic Education dives into all of this work with the roadmap.
Thank you so much, Natasha, and everyone. I just want to make sure everyone can hear me. I am on multiple devices, and side note, both my kids have COVID, and I think I'm getting it next. So I'm going to try to, I'll project as much as I can. Yeah, thank you for that introduction. And I'll also mention that I was on the steering committee for the EAD, and I contributed to in a lot of fun ways to the Pedagogy Companion and now the Implementation Committee or Task Force. And it has been a thrill to really see the EAD launch and now get into the hands of educators and people like me and everyone. And what struck me from the beginning was how much from my background with We the People, as a We the People teacher, and if you're a We the People teacher, put your name in the chat. I recognize many of our people in our network, so that's exciting. What really struck me though was how much the EAD and We the People are great, like a match made in heaven. And so I'm going to share a lot of things that I hope will be helpful to anyone who is already familiar with or using We the People or interested, as well as those who are less familiar and are thinking, what is another way I can do service to the EAD and its intent? And We the People is a very robust, exciting way to do that. And you'll see where the two intersect. So just another note, the way the Center for Civic Ed works with EAD is by contributing to the lessons and continuing to be a champion for the EAD. All right, so just a quick a quick, what is We the People? Like for those who are less familiar. And when I'm done, I will drop in the chat links to all the resources I mentioned here, so anyone can dive deeper into anything that I'm sharing. But the We the People program is a deep, rich constitutional history curriculum. It's articulated for grades upper elementary through high school. And at the end of learning about the Constitution and constitutional history, the students engage in a simulated congressional hearing. And the way it's organized is around the 6 units shown here. And so they prepare testimony, and then they present that testimony as one would at a real congressional hearing in front of judges. So the simulated part is that these are not real members of Congress, but we have people from the community all across the board coming in to serve as those members of Congress, where the students present their prepared testimony and then they answer follow-up questions, just as you do in Congress. So it's a simulation of a governmental process.
Donna, can you just switch into full screen, because we can see your presenter notes on
side.
Yeah, the little sidebar, just so that we can see
That's
the text. The text is a little bit larger.
How do let me make sure I know how to do that.
Display settings up top. You can go up to display settings in the show taskbar.
Yes. Nope. Show taskbar.
It should be in display settings, because what you have is a PowerPoint, and you should be able to change display settings so it looks like the big PowerPoint instead of the little one.
It says swap presenter view and slide view.
Yep.
Is that better?
Yep.
Oh my God, so much better.
Thank
Okay,
you, Donna.
thank you. We don't use Zoom in my district, so it's always like a couple extra steps for me. Thank you for your patience. So what we did, and I working directly with the center as a longtime We the People teacher, because once a We the People teacher, always a We the People teacher, is we began by looking at the We the People curriculum and the EAD. So what I'm going to share tonight is some of the documents are related to the high school version. The examples I'm going to show relate to the high school and middle school, but the center actually has and will very shortly publish the additional correlations between the elementary and the middle school We the People programs with the EAD. So it's a crosswalk between the content of the We the People curriculum and program and the major themes, the design challenges, the driving questions for history and civics. And then there are some other correlations thrown in there. For example, Project Citizen is something that that really enhances a lot of the design challenges and some of the other questions. And so it's not a lockstep one for one, and you'll see how they both complement one another. In some ways, We the People curriculum goes deeper than the question, and in other ways, it just touches the surface and vice versa. But you'll see the connections, and it was a real exciting endeavor. So this is just a snapshot of that of the crosswalk, and a snapshot of theme 1. So again, I'll drop the link for that in the chat, but I'm not going to spend the time talking about the content and how it aligns. What excites me the most is how We the People really speaks to the Pedagogy Companion, so that while students are learning history and civics together, they are doing it in a classroom and in a setting that is the most essential for true civic and history learning that's articulated by that Pedagogy Companion. And then the performance of the simulated congressional hearing is what really gets to the first design challenge. Now, we think that the simulated hearings also hit some of the other aspects of the design challenges. And there are a lot of different ways teachers can implement this, but I'm going to share some of the highlights, the way We the People teachers have used We the People that really hit the design challenge, as well as the different pedagogy moves. And so if we're thinking about the theme of civic participation, what is it about We the People that brings students into that mode and helps them address these design challenges of understanding their place and their agency without feeling overwhelmed or kind of helpless. And what is it that gives them that that like prowess to be able to like walk the walk and talk the talk of what it means to be an authentic and engaged, responsible citizen. And so you'll see how we the people, the preparation and the performance in the hearings really get students to that point. Okay, so 6 pedagogical principles. And being an EAD teacher really starts with naming those 6 different pedagogical principles. So I'm going to front load with what students say about we the people. And as I talk for a couple minutes, I want to see if you'll be able to make the connection between we the people and those pedagogical principles. So this is what students say, and this is taken directly from some of the research around we the people, that the hearings definitely let students, let them study US history more carefully. They research court cases and laws. The hearing forced us to analyze the government. This is civic education because we are in history, we are understanding it as it's happening and how it did happen. And what I love about this excerpt from what the students said is that it really shows how they are integrating the historical knowledge with what it means to grow in their sense of citizenship. And I love Peter Levine's definition of that. You know, we can always consider what that means. So what I'm doing here for the next couple minutes is taking each one of the pedagogical principles and just and showing how the We the People program exemplifies that. So the first one, which I love, is excellence for all. And so in the research on We the People, and certainly firsthand in my own We the People classrooms, what we see is that the students just like, you go in with these high expectations. It is an intense and deep and rigorous text, but the way the students are able to engage with the text and then in preparation for the hearing, it sets a high expectation for the students and their learning from the get-go. And that sets the bar for excellence for all. I really love that in EAD, we're focused on equity and inclusion for all. And indeed, I have found that when I've done We the People for the 15 years I did it in my classrooms, my students furthest from opportunity and the ones that were least likely to be the ones, you know, opting in for AP classes, those were the ones who improved and actually did the best. And a lot of times afterwards, you know, they saw themselves differently. It really changed their own identity as who they were as a student and as a citizen. This is my video. Here we go. Okay. The video starts off a little low, but what I want to share with this video is you'll hear the student combining that historic and constitutional knowledge together. And this is a product of how they prepared for the hearing. And this is one of our citywide hearings in DC pre-pandemic.
Government decides to search our phone, I feel like they should have like a warrant or something in particular on why they should search our phone. I think that's what I said.
I was curious, you said that not all of your team agreed. I'm just curious to hear the different perspectives.
Well, it's another thing that should be applied only for reasonable suspension, public cause. I would think a phone not cause harm, so I think schools and officers are not allowed to pursue a person's phone. That's not person's privacy. What if the phone have evidence of the person that is a crime? I would know that. So you think the government should have access in that case? Yes, they like a terrorist or like a very like high suspect person they committed a crime and he evidence. You know, we should pursue the investigation phone.
Okay, so and getting back to one of the design challenges of civil disagreement and civic friendship, you can see that coming together, the gentlemen had to figure out their points of view as well. Did anyone recognize that starred guest judge all the way on the left? that was Mary Beth Tinker. She's like one of my favorite people ever. So that's one hearing and one way that it really shows excellence for all. Through the Center for Civic Ed, the professional development for We the People and for all their programs really capitalizes on the idea of the growth mindset and capacity building. Oh, here's Mary Beth. Here she is again. She comes to our PDs. She's really phenomenal. And so, you know, it's not just a one and done, but again, like once you're a We the People teacher, you're a We the People teacher for life. And that is because of the strong network and the way that We the People teachers are mentored and supported, not just in their pedagogy, but then in implementing the hearings and in an ongoing way. So building an EAD ready classroom in school. This ties in the idea of like bringing the community, and there's my puppy barking as well, bringing in the community, and it's not just the teacher. And I think the real disposition change happens with students when it does go beyond the classroom. So if they don't leave the classroom, but if other people come in and are there to support their learning, that sends a message to the students that what you're learning is so important to me, that I am here right now with you, that I've taken off work, that, you know, I as an elected official or a parent or the administrator down the hall, I'm here to honor what it is you're learning and to help you cement that into who you are. And so that EAD ready classroom idea is lockstep with what we do in We the People when we bring guest judges in and involve the families and community. And so this is a We the People class where the judges came in. The students did a showcase hearing to practice before their simulated hearing, and then they sat and had conversations and got direct feedback. So these are the conversations about what the students had just testified, the very informal conversations, and you can see them there. Inquiry is a primary mode of learning. So We the People starts with inquiry because everything is driven by questions. And there's all different kinds of inquiry. In the structure of We the People, the questions are already stated. But what's great is that the students can bring in, beyond what they've learned in the classroom, they are bringing in everything. So they're doing outside research. If they want to answer a question using examples from certain types of cases or a period of history or certain current events, they can go in that direction. So it really does open itself up to that kind of learning. It is at its core inquiry-driven learning. Practice of constitutional democracy and student agency. So this to me is where the magic takes place. So there's the preparation for the hearings and there's the hearings themselves. And when We the People teachers put the learning in the hands of the students and allow them to make decisions in their learning with one another, then that transfer of authority to the students is a disposition that we will see and have seen transferred outside the classroom. And so just like Dewey says, so the schools and the classroom are the embryonic democracies. When We the People teachers do that with their students, that's what they're doing for them. They're giving them a simplified environment to practice democratic skills, to practice decision-making and consensus building, collaboration, cooperation, the civil disagreement and the civic friendship. They have to bring all that to bear. And when they do that in that simplified environment in the simulation, then they're able to do that in the real world, outside the classroom, where for other things that matter to them. And then assess, reflect, and improve. And so preparing for the simulated hearings is an iterative process, and it 100% relies on the teacher working with the students to help them understand their learning and to go deeper with it. What I loved most about being a We the People teacher, there's like 100 things, but one of them I loved was that at a certain point, I stopped putting letter grades on their writing. It was just about, you know, helping them go deeper, helping them check their understanding and connect even more things to what they were trying to say. And so there was editing and feedback, but it wasn't like grade driven because they were driving their own learning and then just continuing to go deeper with it. I have one more video. Again, this one starts off a little low.
Don't say something that everybody else wants, and your vote actually help get to what you want and to help everybody else who wants to do it. But there's like a new update for that.
So he asked, well, what's the importance of voting? And this is a middle school student. She articulated, it's fine to have representatives represent you, but if you don't vote, then what if that person, if that person also doesn't represent your views, then you're stuck. And so what I think this really ties us back to is that first theme of civic participation. And so students really develop this sense of agency and possibility and real optimism, because the more they know, the more they understand about what they can do to change things or accept the things that they didn't understand before, but figure out what it is they do want to make a difference in doing. Oops, sorry. There we go. So I'm coming back to the design challenge and how we, the people, might meet the moment with this design challenge. And just a quick summary. Oh my God, that writing is so small. I'm so sorry. So just quick hits. We, the people, teachers use inquiry and other civic education pedagogy principles from the EAD. They make use of rich, deep curriculum that aligns to the goals of the EAD roadmap. Students' dispositions to civic participation grows when they are deeply immersed in their constitutional and history learning and knowledge. And then they're able to use that in an authentic setting. And then simulations of real government processes allow them to talk the talk, which then propels them to walk the walk of active citizenship. They can overcome their paralysis from that design challenge related to their agency by their lived experience interacting with each other, getting into that rich content, interacting with members of their community and government through the We the People simulated hearings, preparation, and performance. And they can practice and sustain the civic friendship and civil disagreement when they collaborate to draft their testimonies. They deepen and refine this disposition during the hearings when they answer questions on their feet. Oh, I have a typo. I'm so embarrassed about their beliefs and ideas. When judges are questioning them, well, you said that this was an unfair ruling. Why? And they really test the depths of their knowledge, and their beliefs about justice and equality and equal opportunity and freedom and everything that's part of their constitutional and historical learning. Some references from the research that was cited, and I'm going to stop sharing if I can figure that out.
Thank you so much,
and
Donna.
I'll put some links in the chat, and I'm also happy to stick around. I know we're gonna maybe break into some groups later. I'm happy to stick around to answer any questions. But thank you so much, Natasha and everyone. And
Thank you so much, Donna. It's always great when we're hearing from different organizations that really approach the work and thinking about how they're incorporating and making those connections to the EAD roadmap. So as we think about those simulations, what I'd love for you to do is take a moment I'm going to share my screen just so that you can see where we are on our landing page for today, but take a moment and think about how the work of the Center for Civic Ed can really deepen student learning in your current setting. What are some of the characteristics of those simulations that you want to take back and think about and explore deeper? And while you are thinking about that, I will say I'm just loving the community that we're creating in this space today as we are thinking, sharing our thoughts and ideas, as we're generating questions, just acknowledging that for a group, what are we? We're just under 70 people. For a group just under 70 people to be able to raise questions and just wondering, It's just wonderful. So keep that up. I really appreciate that. And so as you're thinking about those takeaways for the Center of Civic Ed and thinking about what you want to go and explore deeper, I'm going to go ahead and keep us moving. So take your time, add your thoughts into the Padlet. And as we continue to think about what the EAD roadmap actually looks like in the classroom, this is always the question that we get from everyone. What does this actually look like in the classroom? How can I make this applicable as I think about the roadmap, as I think about those design challenges and the themes and those thematic questions, driving questions? How do I use it to actually shift instruction and shift the experience that my students are having around history and civics content? So as we think about that, a couple of things, as I mentioned before, download the roadmap from the website, but we have an entire website. That's also what I wanted to say. So on this website, not only can you download the roadmap, there's lots of awesome other things too, but what you also are going to find is the interactive version of this roadmap. As you're starting to become more familiar with the different themes and the different questions, it's really a great opportunity to be able to toggle between how the questions start in K-2 and how they progress into 9 and 12, and see, sometimes you might have to pull questions from different grade levels, thinking about, okay, what do I need to do? My students aren't at this question yet. How can I scaffold their learning to get there? So keeping that in mind, and that's really the advantage of having everything there. And as we're thinking about this as well, those themes do not stand alone. As you're building your units, you'll start to see the interconnectivity across the themes. So keeping that in mind too, that when you're doing one theme, there are probably connections in the other themes as well, which is wonderful. So definitely explore that there. And also want to show we do have educator resources. So we had an amazing educator task force. We're on our 3rd rotation now of an educator task force that came together to review resources submitted by education organizations like the Center for Civic Ed, and thinking about what are some examples that we'll see. Right now, the library has about 400 resources across the 7 themes, across the grade bands. So definitely go in and explore those resources. One of the great aspects is you can go in, explore, but you can also sort by grade level, sort by theme. So as we're diving into theme number 1, think about what are some of the resources that you might want to go and explore later. You can actually filter by that, which is a wonderful feature within the search section. And on that note, I do want to invite our next guest, Michael Martirone, and he is an AP Government and Politics World Culture teacher at Egg Harbor Township High School in New Jersey. He's also an adjunct professor at the Richard Stockton University, where he teaches social studies foundations to pre-service educators. He's been a member of the iCivics Educator Network since 2007, where he focuses on empowering student voice in the community and engaging students in the political process. In 2016, he was a finalist for the New Jersey State Teacher of the Year, and in 2020, he was named the Gilder Lerman History Teacher of the Year for the state of New Jersey. You can also follow him. We'll put in his Twitter handle in here just momentarily. But as we turn the floor over to Michael and continue with these lessons from the classroom, we want to make sure that we're always incorporating educator voice in these sessions. Donna was an educator. I was an educator. Michael's an educator. It's important to have that connection to the classroom so that you can actually think of real application today. Okay, so I'm going to turn
so much, and it's a pleasure to be here. And just piggybacking off of Donna, I'm a We the People teacher just as well. My kids, we never beat the North Jersey schools, but we learn a lot. So tonight, I'm going to share with you guys some of the things that I do within my classroom using the EAD roadmap. And the really nice part about the roadmap and what I like about it the most is the idea that we're going to explore the habits and values and skills that create productive citizens. And that's what it's all about. So you can go ahead and talk. So the one question that we got from our previous session, some of the breakout rooms, was people were asking, how are we actually using the EAD? And I just want to share with you a couple of ways that I use it in my classroom and my school. So right now, we are in the midst of redesigning our curriculum. So while we're not using the EAD as a curriculum per se, we are incorporating some of the design challenges and driving questions to drive our curriculum. In the classroom, like I said, I teach world cultures. So I'm using those driving questions to drive instructions. And you guys can see a couple examples of some of the questions that are being asked. So in 9th grade, it's what pathway of participation can I choose in order to exert positive influence? Okay, for 6th and 8th grade, how do I think change is brought about? What is my theory of change? I mean, that's a pretty amazing question. For 3rd through 5th grade, what qualities of character virtues make a good citizen and or president and or leader? And I mean, that's just getting kids thinking about what makes a good leader is so cool. And it's just like, you're going to see, we've got to get kids started early. And then K through 12, how do you evaluate leaders? Okay, what makes an effective leaders? You know, I'm thinking about this from the standpoint of, I have, 3 nieces and nephews, and my 5-year-old niece, Lucy, one day I want to sit down and ask her, like, what makes a good leader? What makes, someone that's admirable? Start having those conversations early on. Okay. And then the final way that I'm using the EAD roadmap is to build a culture within my PLC. And yeah, I'm the teacher that said it tonight, the professional learning community. So within our PLCs, we're bringing up the roadmap. We're trying to fester out some of the design challenges and the driving questions in order to drive our content. I think as you guys explore the roadmap, you will find that the questions within the EAD are truly remarkable, and they are going to be thought-provoking. They're going to prompt great discussions with your colleagues and your students. Go ahead, Natasha. So the focus of my topic today or tonight is how do we go from the classroom? How do we go from the classroom to the real world? How do we get our kids civically engaged? How do we get them going to town halls? How do we get them to be active voters? How do we get them to be, members of the Board of Education? And yes, that is a former student of mine who was elected to the Board of Education not too long ago. So he currently is my boss, and he saw me and said, oh, I remember the time you gave me that detention. I said, yeah, but remember the time I gave you the extra credit? So we'll wait and see. We're in the middle of a contract year negotiation, so we'll see how that pays off. But we want to have kids that, are protesting for the things that they care about. And we want to have kids that are meeting with their congressmen and their senators. They're taking the time to advocate for the issues they care about. So how do we get our kids from the classroom to this lifelong civic engagement as citizens? And the goal is we've got to practice. All right. I'm a runner. Running doesn't come overnight. I was not good at math. Math did not come good overnight. So you need to practice. And just a real quick story. So one time I was having my students write letters to the president. Very simple thing to do. And the kids were writing their envelopes. And I was like, well, you got to write in blue or black ink using a pen. And the kids did not know how to do an envelope, how to set up an envelope. I said, and by the time this is like May, June, I'm like, what do you guys mean you don't know how to do it? Write an envelope. And my one student, Melissa, who's now a teacher, she said, well, Martirone, we've never been taught this. You can't expect us to know it. So the point of the story is we can't expect students to just automatically, when they turn 18, to go out, go research, go vote, and do all this great things and become just amazing citizens. We've got to practice it in the classroom. All right, go ahead. So the 2 questions I want to focus on, how can we help students become better, engaged citizens? And how can we demonstrate that idea of disagreement and civic friendship, and thus the benefits of an American constitutional democracy? And how can we help students pursue civic action that is authentic, responsible, and informed? And I love those 3 verbs. Go ahead. So the one thing I want to focus on in the lessons that I'm going to share with you guys is focus on the process. The process is more important than the overall result, if you will. You want to have students engaged in meaningful discussions in school, because I think you would all agree, our students are so much better at this than adults. I mean, you look at conversations in the classroom, they are thoughtful, they are respectful, they are productive. And then all of a sudden you go online and it's a free-for-all. People just aren't nice. So what's the disconnect between what happens in school and what happens in the real world? And what happens is people lose the process of engagement. So we need to provide our students, and this is what the EAD does, with the framework for a lifetime of civic participation. Go ahead, Natasha. So I like to start small. So tonight I'm going to share with you just a couple lessons that I do in my classroom, some of my own lessons, and then some of the ones that I've used from the EAD. So the first thing, starting small, I like to use what's called a chalk talk. It's silent. So for those big classrooms, it's incredibly hard for them to do, but you can pose any type of question. So early on in September, before the relationships are really established, I'll ask them, what does it mean to be a good citizen? And the chalk talk requires students to, go up there, they can comment, they can respond, they can ask a question to one another, all while being done silently. And this allows for students to, sort of like we do with the Padlet, to think, be deliberate in their practice, and they're not really debating one another. They're not coming at each other. So some of the results we get from this are, a good citizen means you listen. A good citizen means you're helping others when you need it, standing up for what is right, voting, jury duty, paying taxes, following existing laws. So one of my kids wrote, stopping with stop signs, wearing seatbelts. And I love not sharing things that are fake. And that came up this past September, when all our schools were dealing with devious licks and all these other TikTok challenges. Good citizenship means you have an obligation to stand up and say, listen, that's not right, even if it might not be popular. So one of those, reasons, or one of those methods, is just small steps to get kids talking. Go ahead, Natasha. So then a later lesson that I'll do is a conversation, not a debate yet. The debates will come, but one of the fun things we love to do in our world cultures and our civics classes is we'll do small group discussions. Who was the most influential Disney princess? Everyone has their Disney princess, but this gets the kids talking, okay? And it gets the kids thinking about the backstory. It gets the kids thinking about what the life story was like for each Disney princess. And it gets the kids having a conversation. And I try to, award points or try to encourage the kids. Well, let's see if you can come to a consensus within the group. And that's hard to do. And the kids early on realize, like, ooh, there is a disconnect between, my favorite Disney princess and others. And then, of course, you got other people trying to bring in all sorts of Disney princess and what constitutes a Disney princess. But again, the process is more important than the result in this case. So again, getting the kids established, building that relationship, talking about what are the qualities of good leaders, what are the qualities of good princesses. And of course, everyone's always quick to point out that these are all strong, independent women. I love when the kids bring out, they don't need their Prince Charming, they just need themselves, but it gets the kids talking. So these are two easy things that you can do within your classroom. Go ahead, Natasha. So one of my friends tried this in 6th grade. I'm a sucker for John Kennedy. He's just, the inaugural address is the simple call to arms. So this is a lesson from the Kennedy Library. This is basically, the lesson is called Ask Not. And basically you're going to do two things with this. There's some primary source historical information within the lesson. So you'll read that, and then you'll watch segments of Kennedy's inaugural. And of course you'll watch the Ask Not phrase, and you'll challenge the students to, what does this call to action mean? What does this call to service mean? And it gets the kids engaged as to what they could do in their family, their school, their community, and their country in some way. Again, none of this is partisan. This is just getting kids thinking about identifying problems within their school, community, and country, and what can we do to fix it, to solve that problem. And inevitably, it means working together. So the teacher that I spoke with said they had some really good results. You can do an extension of this lesson where the students are even writing their own inaugural address, their own call to action. So now you're incorporating history, you're incorporating oratory, and these are all 21st century skills that truly any student, any individual is going to need for a successful 21st century. Go ahead. So this is a lesson. So I love DC, and when the museum was open, they had these polls, these little questions. And I also noticed that I feel like it's a city thing. Whenever I would go to New York or Boston, they would always have like tip jars, and they would have questions, and that kind of encouraged you to put tips in. But this was really cool from the museum. And basically they would post any question on there, and you just take a little sticker, boom, and you yes or no, agree, disagree. I'd like to do this every Tuesday in my classroom. And the reason why, Election Day is a Tuesday. So it gets the kids in the habit of identifying Tuesday. We're going to have a discussion possibly, but we're going to vote on something. Again, it's getting kids in that habit. One of my running coach says, you just got to get yourself in that habit. And once you get in a good habit, it's going to become second nature. So getting the kids in that habit of voting and participating in school, you got to do it. So I like to start with very simple questions. Again, in September, I'm not going to be like, all right, who you vote for, Trump or Clinton, Trump or Biden? Like, good riddance. No, start simple. I'm like, hamburgers or hot dogs? And of course, I didn't have the vegan or the vegetarian option. So that was the third party challenge. You go winter or summer, day or night, breakfast or lunch. And then you work, once you, again, start building that classroom community, should grades be required? Should the voting age be lowered to 16? Should the Supreme Court have term limits? Should women be allowed to serve in major combat actions? These are all things, again, you build into. And you can do it publicly and have the kids vote. Sometimes I'll change it up and have the kids participate via Google. Just do a quick Google poll. So there's easy ways to do this. And, you can choose to do a discussion piece if you want, or you can just choose to let it stand and do a quick vote and say, okay, that's it, and move on. But you're getting the kids in the habit of having their voices heard. And that's really fun. So one thing you can do is to think of topics within your classroom. Again, it doesn't have to be a whole, class discussion. I mean, if you structure it that way, but you can very simply do, something easy, but it gets the kids. Again, we're all about getting the kids in the habit of being engaged and practicing those civic skills. Go ahead, Natasha. So this is another great extension of the Tuesdays are for voting. So this lesson that's on the EAD website goes through the history of voting. And one thing that I think kids are surprised to learn, and I don't know how it is in your classrooms, but it's the idea of not everyone has access to voting, and not everyone, when we talk about we the people, it didn't always mean we the people. So this lesson really goes through the history of suffrage and how voting was granted or protected through individual communities of color with the 15th Amendment, so the suffrage movement with the 19th Amendment. And it also goes through, in particular, Native American women were not included under the 19th Amendment, how there was a separate law that had to happen. So this is a fun extension when we're talking about voting. I see Donna's talking about the challenge. They do another great lesson that I didn't feature here called the Soapbox Challenge, where it's encouraging kids to get on their soapbox and talk about an issue that's passionate. Again, elevating those kids' voices any chance you get really just drives home this idea of civic engagement and civic participation. All right. And then ultimately you can end the discussion, connecting between who gets to vote, who has a seat at the table, and who ultimately has political power. And that also you can circle back to the idea of, 18-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, are their voices heard because they don't have a seat at the table. And it reemphasizes the idea that voting is so important. Go ahead. All right, so this is a favorite lesson of mine. I'm going to give a shameless plug to the iCivics Educator Network, which I'm a member of. This was an awesome lesson that came out during the 2020 election. This was just a fantastic document, all sorts of resources. It's called Student Powered Elections. What I really like about this is it shows, although it came out during the elections, it gives students the option to participate in ways other than voting. Attend a protest, write a letter to your congressman, senator, or president, or mayor. It talks about different ways of researching your issue, researching your bill. This is, the entire packet, I think, is like 20 pages. It's editable online. It's truly a great resource. So if you haven't had a chance to get to it, I would check out that link and take a look at it. It doesn't, and the best part about this is it doesn't need to be an election to use this lesson. You can cherry pick different segments, but I really enjoyed this lesson. Listen, in the times we're in, it's nonpartisan, obviously, but it's just as apolitical as you can get and presents the facts. It's objective. I truly enjoyed this, and the kids did as well. And it gets the kids thinking about what more they can do other than just voting. Go ahead, Natasha. So civic participation. So also facing history in ourselves. I love this one. So a couple things that I do in my classroom is we try and get the kids involved in service learning projects. So one year we had students fundraise for Heifer International. One year we raised a couple $1,000s for UNICEF based off of a couple books that we read. And the idea with this lesson is it's asking 10 different questions about how to amplify your voice. So for example, why does this matter to me? How can I get more people to care? And another question I like is how do I make allies? Because that's one thing that our kids have all these passionate issues, but we don't show them how to connect with other larger groups. So one thing about facing history in ourselves does is it challenges the students to ask the kids to challenge them to reach out to other institutions or broader coalitions. And that, again, goes to the civic friendship. You know, you and I may disagree on, 2 out of 3 things, but that one thing that you and I agree on, we can be allies on. And we see that again and again. And truly, that's how in politics, you got to make things as bipartisan as you can. You get what you can while you can get it. All right, go ahead, Natasha. All right, so finally, just a couple more things in your classroom you can do. You got to make it fun. The reason why kids love their STEM classes, they are building things. They're knocking things down. They're reconstructing things. In a democracy, it's abstract. Depending on where you see, we are building a democracy. We may be taking a couple parts off to reconstruct it, to refigure it. I mean, it's a great metaphor, but kids have fun in their STEM classes because it's hands-on. So making, civics and civic participation as engaging and active as possible, that's what you've got to do. So, okay, I'm sure we've all done voter registration drives for kids for the high school classes. Make it fun. Have a little competition with it. See the who raises the most or who brings in the most voter registries. But more importantly, I would say, is absentee voter awareness. We get the kids participating, then we get them registered to vote, and then they turn 18, then they graduate, and then they're off to college, and there's no follow through. So one of the things I try to do with my seniors is, connect, reach out to alumni who are, voting for the first time, because it is a hassle when you're at college to get your absentee ballot. It's a hassle. We've got to make it easier. So, that's one of the components of civic engagement is reaching out to others. So we do voter registration, absentee awareness. Sometimes I will encourage my kids, listen, if you're interested in a topic, look at potential interest groups. Like a lot of kids are interested in protecting the environment. Well, there's lots of interest groups that offer, student discounts. And if they're not joining, maybe they can, simply research it. Additionally, I do movie nights. I do debate and election night parties where students will either come to school or we've gone over parents' houses. And during 2016, we had all the kids and all the parents watching the presidential debate. And what was awesome about that was I could literally pause Hillary Clinton or pause Donald Trump. The kids could take a breath and kind of unpack what the candidates were saying. And we could try and make a prediction as to what the candidates were going to say. And there was no way we could predict what was going to come out of either one of their mouths next. But that idea of watching it in real time, the idea of doing something together. It's kind of like my favorite story of the Supreme Court justices. They all shake hands before they meet to discuss cases. Why? Civic friendship. I'm sure Justice Ginsburg didn't have a whole lot in common with Justice Thomas, but they sat down, they shook hands, civic friendship. All right. We debate election night parties, youth as civics experts. That's another tremendous opportunity for students to become involved in. My one student, Reneen Rahani, in the bottom picture, she was a youth as civics expert. She enjoyed it tremendously. This is a really opportune time to elevate student voices, and she just did a lot with it. And in terms of civic days and civic holidays, we would go towards the end of the year, we would partner up with a 6th or 7th grade class because New Jersey at the time did not have a civics requirement. But we would partner up with those classes and we would teach a little bit. We would do a lesson from iCivics, and then we would play some of the iCivics games in the afternoon. So it was just a fun way, again, trying to get the kids interested in the buy-in to civic engagement. So again, all these are things that you can do within your classroom. And then the last 2 things that I'll suggest are things that our school just started to do this year. So Natasha, I think if we can go ahead. So the last 2 things, and this has been like a passion project of mine, a seal of civic engagement. I know they're doing this in California. So for my friends on the West Coast, they're doing great work. I think in New York, they have a seal of civic engagement. So I was kind of inspired. So at graduation, we have like Principals Award for academics. We have the seals of biliteracy. And in middle school and the little kid grades, don't we offer like the little certificates like Student of the Month, Student of the Week, the Citizenship Award? Why can't we do that at the high school level? So one of the things that I've been pushing for our school, we offer now a seal of civic engagement. So we're challenging students to identify real world problems and take action, even if they're unsuccessful, as long as they're making that good faith effort to identify that problem and use their civic skills. Maybe they're, asking the mayor, saying, Mayor, what can we do about this? And that's something, I've been trying to get like a national civics award, it's a long-term goal of mine, but this is something you can do within your classroom or within your school community. Again, this is a great way for you to use the EAD to build that school community of your own. And finally, my school is, like I said, redesigning our curriculum. We invited students for the very first time to sit and write curriculum with us. So it's really neat to see what the students want out of the curriculum and what we can add to that. So again, any opportunity you have in your classroom or your school to elevate student voice that's how you do it. And you get the kids to buy in. And now, in the next couple of years, when we, implement a new curriculum with civics and new history standards, this is something that was written, in the words of Lincoln, by the students for the students. So those are all little things that you can do, within your school. Again, with civic participation, we're following the trend lines, not the headlines. We're building our republic, not for tomorrow, but for next week, not for my kids and my nieces and nephews, but later on down the road for my, hopefully, I don't know, maybe grandkids one day, but we're building it for our children's children. So it starts now. So you're not going to see results overnight, one step at a time. So with that, in the political words, I yield back the balance of my time. I'll be happy to take any questions you have in the breakout rooms. And yes, I see all sorts. I'll share with you the movies we watch.
Thank you, Michael. I'm always blown away by the depth that our teachers and all of you can take us through in starting and understand the importance of starting with the basic and how we gradually make it more complicated to have those more in-depth inquiries that are happening with the learning around civic participation. So that is just amazing. I want you to take a moment. I know this is always the hard part. Take a moment, stop, process, think about what did you hear from Michael's presentation that really has you thinking about how you can continue working on civic participation within your classroom and how you're thinking about engaging with it. This is part of the reason why we always want to make sure that we bring teacher voice to this conversation. We cannot recreate the passion that Michael brings to the classroom. We can't recreate the creativity. I'm only imagining like the multiple sticky dots that I could do all sorts of topics throughout. But it's also something simple, something easy that you can start with in order to get to those really rich inquiries. How do you spark a conversation and gradually get deeper? And I love how everyone is putting in their movie recommendations here. And I know some of you who are joining us on the phone, I keep getting the question, are we going to get the recording? Are we going to get the recording? Yes, definitely. It'll take us a day or two to edit it, but we'll send you the recordings. We'll have the slide deck. We'll have Donna's presentation embedded in there too. Michael's presentation is in there, and we'll have that all available for you so that you can go back. You can look at the links also on our landing page for today. The links to the major resources that Michael shared are linked out there. So definitely continue exploring and continue to think about how can you actually bring this into your classroom and how can you actually make that connection between what you're doing in the classroom and those EAD themes and those EAD design challenges, and how do we start to grapple with some of those concepts and ideas. And I'm seeing some great ideas coming into the chat now, into the Padlet now as you're sharing, the voting, I saw some service learning connections, thinking about how you're really making these authentic, engaging activities. Okay, thinking about, I saw something, don't be afraid to take chances, try something out. Okay, think about what is something that you can go after today's session and try out next week. Okay, or try out tomorrow. Okay, think about what are those small steps that you can take that will get you to getting that more rigorous student participation and inquiry. And I always love how our time flies. 90 minutes flies by. So we are just about at our time. I am going to give you 5 minutes to chat in a breakout room with some peers, because you've been quiet for a while. I know you've been sharing your thoughts and writing, but some of you just need a few minutes. So I'm actually going to open, and then Patricia, can you help me just open up breakout rooms? I'm going to open up breakout rooms. If you have, with a couple of caveats, if you have any lingering questions for Donna, she'll stay here in the main room with me. So if you have any questions here, definitely stay here, ask those questions. Breakout rooms will be with peers. Michael's going to pop in between some of those. He's going to be like the Flash. I'm going to give you about 5 to 7 minutes to connect and talk, share some ideas, and then we'll come back together and close out for today. This time is flying. And let's see. Patricia, you have those breakout rooms? There we go. It's like magic. And as you're getting into your breakout rooms, introduce yourself and discuss. Breakout rooms. Hi, everyone. I can always tell when you're having a good discussion and that you're mad at me that I didn't give you more time in breakout rooms. And I'm always going to apologize. And one of these days we will have the full 20 minutes. I promise you. Next time we'll have the full 20 minutes. I'll block off the half an hour so that we'll get 20 minutes. We'll do it. We'll plan it that way. But I really appreciate you. And I can always tell when it's a good conversation. Sorry to cut it off so fast. A couple of things that I do want to close out with today, because I could leave you in breakout rooms and then just have you go over time, but time is important and I want to make sure that we get you out of here on time. So final thoughts, there is an exit ticket. So as I go through our closing slides for today, definitely take a moment and do it right now while you're listening. The exit ticket for today's session, it's right on the bottom of our landing page for today. You'll see it right there. And I know Patricia has put it in the chat as well. So while I'm closing this out, please go ahead and start working on that exit ticket. Share your thoughts, reflections. And I'm sure I'm going to get comments, Natasha, we need more time in breakout rooms. So I'm apologizing now. I accept it. I'll own it. Sorry. So as we think about the amazing conversation we had today, the presentation, thinking about how our organizations are thinking about that concept of civic engagement and civic participation, and thinking about from the Center of Civic Ed and Donna, thinking about from the classroom, how Michael's constantly thinking about this and incorporating this. Part of the reason that we're having these conversations all together, coming together and constantly hearing these unique perspectives from both organizations that are doing the work, individuals that are doing the work, and what the documents actually say, and all of the ways that those interconnect, is because this is going to take all of us. As we think about our ambitious goals, we think about how it's really everyone, 60 million students, 100,000 schools, and 1 million teachers. When we think about that, thinking about all of us doing our parts, and those of you who are coming back to these sessions, think about how you're deepening your learning every time. Not next week's, so the next session is in February. It's going to be an even deeper conversation going into theme number 2. And again, we'll have an organization, we'll have a teacher come in and just share their perspectives and the way that they grapple with that theme in order to deepen learning that's happening in their building. Now, as we think about what can you actually do as you leave here today, think about how are you sharing this roadmap with your colleagues, your school, your community leaders, thinking about what resources are you going to explore. So you have the whole educator resource library that's on the EAD website that we showed you before, but you have the resources that Michael recommended. You have the We the People resources and those resources from the Center for Civic Education. So we have all of those resources. Think about what can you start with. Okay, maybe it's just starting with the voting activity, and that's how you're going to spark your discussion and spark civic participation. And thinking about maybe you're just going to start having conversations more often and thinking about what students are doing in their community, what are the connections that they can make, because we know civic participation is not just voting. There's so many different aspects of it. And then finally, continue the dialogue. Okay, so attend the next workshop with us in our series. Also, our partners are leading webinars and having events as well. NCSS during the conference in February, there's going to be a whole thread of EAD workshops and content. So thinking about that. So just continue the conversation, and we hope that you come back and join us during our next session. Our next session is going to be exploring how communities shape the land and how land shapes communities. Not going to lie, there's going to be some maps. The Leventhal Map Center is going to come, and we are going to have an educator who has worked both in the elementary and the middle school space come to the conversation, so which is super exciting. And my team knows I'm a little biased. Maps, it's going to be great. Also, then the next session after that is in March, thinking about balancing the aspiration and intentions of we, the people of the United States. And if you're interested, we have our EAD District Teacher Fellowship district applications that are due in February. And if that's more if you want to have a conversation with your district leader and think about, yeah, we want to go all in and do this as a district, thinking about how we're shifting curriculum, that RFP is open now. So definitely take a glance if you're coming at this from a district perspective, or you want to share with your leadership. And on that note, 8:30 on the button. Thank you. Just wanted to say, and I'll stop sharing my screen. Thank you everyone for joining today's session, for engaging in a conversation, for sharing your thoughts and ideas. We truly appreciate it. And all of our collaboration together will continue to make the EAD roadmap a reality, and thinking about how we deepen that history and civics instruction in our classrooms. And on that note, I hope everyone has a fabulous afternoon or evening, and enjoy the rest of your week. We'll see you soon.